poor girl forced to undress in public, but she's actually a billionaire heiress and fought back. Late afternoon slid across the plaza in a thin gold sheet, lighting up the hawkers' umbrellas and the scuffed tiles and the chrome rims of buses idling at the curb. Music leaked from a busker's speaker, chopped to pieces by the call of vendors, by the hiss of roasting corn, by the lilt of bargaining. Screens hovered in hands like extra faces. Every other person seemed to be filming something, even when nothing was happening. It felt like a place where anything could become content. Maya kept her chin tucked and her hands inside the sleeves of her threadbare coat. The coat had been stitched and restitched, neat little lines she'd sewn herself, the fabric softened to a permanent sigh. Her shoes had taken one rainy season too many, the rubber creased at the toes like old skin. The backpack dragged her shoulder to one side, straps biting. She shifted her weight and moved between a clothing rack on the sidewalk and a trio of teenagers recording a dance. She smelled pepper, diesel, sugar. The whole place was loud and ordinary, big enough to swallow her. "Hey, you, hold up." The voice hit her back like the flat of a hand. She turned. The security chief from the boutique stood in the doorway, wide shoulders filling the frame, radio on his hip chirping with static. Beside him hovered a woman in glossy makeup, holding a small ring light on a stick, live chat scrolling down her screen. You could hear the tone before the words, the bright, smiling certainty that this was a show. "Guys," the influencer said to her viewers, swinging the lens toward Maya, "we literally just caught a thief." "I didn't take anything," Maya said. Even to her own ear, her voice sounded careful, like she was trying not to spill it. "Step aside for a search," the security chief said. "Standard procedure." She looked at the boutique behind him. Glass slick with light, spotless mannequins in impossible stances. "Can we go inside?" she asked. "Or a back room? With a female staff member?" The ring light drifted closer. "Why hide if you didn't steal?" the influencer said, all faux innocence. "Guys, we keep it real here." People were already slowing. First 5, then 15, then more. The plaza loved a sudden center. Cameras tilted. A man with a satchel laughed and said something under his breath to the person beside him. The security chief angled his body to block the doorway and gestured to the open space near the curb. "Here's fine," he said. "Coat. Shoes. Bag on the ground." Maya's mouth went dry. She could feel the ache in her right shoulder where the backpack dug in. The old instinct to minimize herself flickered on. Another instinct, cold and bright, stepped in front of it. She drew a breath she hoped didn't look like a breath. "Please," she said. "Inside. Or a female staffer." His lip curled. "I said here." He reached for her sleeve. A teenage vendor stepped close enough for her to smell the sweetness of bottled soda. He had a tray of phone cases hung from his neck like a sandwich board. "Auntie water?" he murmured, holding out a cold bottle with a gentleness that made her throat tighten. His name tag was handwritten in ballpoint. Tari. "Thanks," she said and took it, the chill stinging her palm. A woman in a patterned head wrap, mid-40s maybe, cut through the ring of onlookers. "What's wrong with you?" she said to the security chief. "You can't do this here. Take her inside." "Ma'am," the influencer said, turning her camera to the woman's face with a smile sharper than a blade. "Mind your—" "Don't point that thing at me," the woman said. Her name would be Kemi. Maya would learn later. For now she was just courage in a voice. The security chief planted himself. "Back off," he said. "Store policy. We have reason." "What reason?" Maya asked quiet. She felt her hands shake inside her sleeves and tucked them deeper, a small, private refusal to let anyone see. She scanned for name tags, badges. The security chief's nameplate said Ike. His radio flashed the boutique's logo. The influencer's handle, stamped on her microphone at Shanice Live. "Ma'am," Ike said to Maya, louder so the crowd could hear. "Coat. Shoes. Bag." She unbuttoned the coat. It felt like removing a layer of herself. The late light reached her sweater and found every pill of the cheap yarn. She slipped off her shoes and let her feet settle on the warm tiles, the grit pushing up into her socks. Her cheeks flamed then cooled as a breeze cut across the plaza and the buskers' music stuttered off. She knelt and placed her backpack on the ground. The influencer narrated every motion like a sports commentator. See, guys? If you didn't do anything, you'd just comply. A fresh wave of chat hearts scrolled up her screen. Maya unzipped the bag and lifted out items one by one. A paperback with a cracked spine. A small sewing kit with a coil of navy thread and a needle stuck into felt. A notepad with a rubber band. A Tupperware with a ghost of stew in it. Keys on a loop with a tiny brass charm. A folded receipt. She placed each on the tiles in a neat line. It looked like an inventory of an unexciting life. Ike crouched and rifled, shaking the notepad like something might fall out. The influencer leaned in with her lens, hungry for a reveal. A child at the edge of the circle asked his father if this was a game. "Move it along," a passing vendor muttered. No one moved. From inside the boutique, the manager arrived, tan suit, polished shoes, hair that folded back perfectly from his forehead. He wore a small lapel pin that caught the light. He could have chosen concern. He chose impatience. "What's the situation, Ike?" "Suspected theft," Ike said. "We're conducting a search." The manager looked at Maya like she had tracked mud across his rug. "Inside," Kemi said again, heat in her voice. "Have you no sense?" "We have to maintain a deterrent," the manager said, ignoring her, eyes on the small crowd like an audience he was learning to play. "Transparency is a kind of service. People want to see we take security seriously." "Your transparency is her humiliation," Kemi snapped. The manager didn't look at her. "Empty the inner pockets," he told Maya, as if her body were a drawer he could open. "Female staffer," Maya said, steady as she could make it. He gave her a smile that wasn't one. "Don't perform. If you didn't steal, nothing to worry about." A few laughs rippled. It sounded like the kind of laughter people do when they want to belong to whatever seems strongest. Maya felt the flinch rise and pass. She pictured a line. The ground where her bag lay, the shoes beside it, the coat slumped like a fallen animal. She pictured another line. Faces, badges, lights. She set the bottle of water on the curb, the condensation leaving a dark ring. She turned out her sweater pockets onto her palm, a bus ticket stub, a wrinkled candy wrapper, a small safety pin she carried out of habit. She placed them with the rest. Ike poked the Tupperware, sniffed it, smirked. The influencer zoomed on the receipt. "What's this?" "Look at this, guys." Maya held it up so everyone could see. The shop logo was not the boutique's. "Bread," she said. 2 days ago. A young man in the back said, "She looks like she would steal," and someone beside him shushed him in a half-hearted way. The busker started another song then stopped, annoyed at the crowd blocking his case. The search went on. It felt endless because it was graceless. Ike turned the bag itself upside down and shook it like a sack. Nothing else came out. The influencer's voice faltered. Without a prize, the pitch of her performance had nowhere to go. She tried for righteous. "Sometimes thieves hide tags in," she drifted off. The manager, Crane, according to the little plaque that swung where his tie met his shirt, checked his watch. "Anything?" he asked Ike. "Nothing," Ike said, and his voice had the grudging flatness of someone robbed of a moment. Crane's face arranged itself into an expression that would scan as responsible if you didn't listen. "Appears to be a misunderstanding," he said to the crowd. "We appreciate everyone's patience." "Ma'am," he added to Maya with a nod that missed her eyes, "you're free to go." "Apologize to her," Kemi said. "Properly." Crane's smile thinned. "We have to protect our inventory," he said. "We also have to protect our customers' experience." He flicked a glance at Maya's coat pooled on the tiles. "And we encourage everyone to remember that presentation matters. It avoids these situations." "Watch how you look," someone echoed from the edge, like a joke that wasn't funny. Maya didn't answer. Anything she said would be eaten by cameras and digested into someone else's version. She crouched and gathered her things. The zipper stuttered on the bag, and she smoothed it with her thumb until it ran true. She placed the paperback back inside, then the sewing kit, the notepad, the Tupperware, the keys, the receipt, the small safety pin returned to its place tucked in the seam of the backpack strap. She slid on her shoes, feeling grit press through the thin soles, and lifted the coat from the ground. She shook it once and put it on, sliding her arms into sleeves that had learned the shape of her. Tari hovered, chest rising with an anxious breath he didn't seem to know he was holding. "Auntie," he said, "you okay?" "I will be," she said, and meant it differently than it sounded. She passed the water back. "Keep it. Thank you." He nodded, eyes flicking past her to the influencer's lens, then back, as if he were choosing which world to stand in. Kemi touched Maya's elbow for a second, the warmth of her palm cutting through the residue of the air. "Don't let them make you small," she said. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement, like two people signing the same line on a document. Crane and Ike turned toward the entrance, already speaking in low voices about staffing and optics. As they moved, the manager's lapel pin caught the light again, a small, discreet emblem Maya recognized, though she let no sign of recognition cross her face. The pin belonged not just to the boutique, but to the parent company, the one that wrote policies in rooms far from plazas like this. She let her gaze rest on the pin for a beat, the way you look at an address before you commit it to memory. The influencer stepped closer, still streaming though her chat had gone bored. "Any words for the viewers?" she asked, angling her phone so that the camera ate up Maya's face and filtered it into something more consumable. Maya looked into the tiny black eye of the lens. She didn't smile. She didn't give them a speech. What she gave was only a look, level, unblinking, the kind that tacks itself inside the mind and stays there, like a pin through fabric. "Remember me," the look said. Not a threat. A promise. She swung the backpack onto her shoulder. The strap dug at the same old place, and she adjusted it without looking away from the influencer until the last possible second. Then she turned. Around them, the plaza resumed itself, as if nothing had happened, though everyone would talk about it over dinner and in captions and in small messages to friends. "Did you see? Were you there? Send the link." Buses hissed. The busker tried another song. The smell of corn thickened. Maya walked to the edge of the circle and paused, one hand in her coat pocket to steady the tremor that hadn't quite left. She glanced back once. Crane, framed by glass and light, lifted a hand to his tie and adjusted it, the pin flashing. She catalogued his posture, the way his mouth moved around words, the cadence of his voice when he said misunderstanding. She noted the time on the boutique door sticker, the reflection of the security camera in the glass, the angle of the influencer's arm as she held her phone, the half-visible name on Ike's radio. Names. Faces. Angles. Quietly, so only she could hear it, she said, "This isn't over." Then she slipped into the moving crowd and let it carry her away. Her apartment held the day's heat the way a closed fist holds a coin. She turned the fan on low and opened the window to let the city speak in. Distant horns, a child somewhere laughing too hard, a woman advertising plantain with a bell of a voice. She set the backpack on the table and laid the coat down flat, smoothing the fabric with her palm until it obeyed. The tear near the pocket had widened on the plaza tiles. She threaded a needle and began a small, careful ladder stitch, pulling each rung tight, the motion steadying what the rest of her couldn't. On her phone, the plaza had already been broken into a dozen angles, a dozen voices. She watched one clip with the sound off, then again with sound on, letting the phrases settle in their exact order. "We literally just caught a thief. Standard procedure. Watch how you look." She paused and scrubbed back and forth until she had the timestamp, the reflection in the glass, the way the manager's pin flashed as he spoke. She opened a note and wrote dates and handles at Shanice Live, 1746. Ike, security, Crane, manager, boutique entrance camera, northwest angle. She took screenshots and saved links, downloading videos before they could be edited into new shapes. Each file she labeled with the unglamorous precision that turned story into evidence. The coat lay newly mended, clean seam where a wound had been. She ran a thumb over it. The thread matched almost perfectly. You would have to look on purpose to see it. She hung the coat on the back of a chair, and the chair looked like a person waiting. The apartment was small, but it had the dignity of being known. A bookshelf with spines softened by rereading, a kettle that clicked off with a satisfied sound, a single plant doing its best in a chipped pot. A framed photo in the corner of the shelf leaned against the wall, not on display but present. She picked it up. The image was from years before, a gala lit like evening pretending to be a star field, women in silk the color of oceans, men in tuxedos whose buttons had never learned to be anything but polished. There she stood, hair in a low knot, a dress that moved when she breathed, a small crest at the clasp of her necklace, two stylized lions facing each other over a shield. She had smiled for the photographer in a way that said nothing and everything at once. She put the photo back where it had been, not facing out. In the drawer beneath the cutlery lay a folder with a handful of newspaper clippings and printed articles she kept as a reminder, not as trophies. The crest on the necklace matched the letterhead on those papers. The family conglomerate. ArcLight Holdings, though it had been called other things in other decades. The headlines varied in tone depending on who paid for the ad on the facing page. Acquisitions applauded, a factory fire in a paragraph, a land dispute treated as weather. The one that bit even now was small and older than her memory of its day. Workers locked out overnight after a wage dispute. An editorial praising decisive leadership, while showing a photograph where the workers' faces had been reduced to a blur of hats. Her father had framed the world as a game that rewarded clean hands and firm decisions. Her mother had called wealth a tool that had opinions. She had learned to move through rooms like a rumor. Seen but ungraspable, always leaving with more information than she brought. When she told them she was taking a year for a social impact fellowship, research on transit deserts and microcredit programs, they had nodded out of love and confusion. She did not add out loud that she wanted to ride the bus and stand in lines and learn the price of things without being offered the good chair. Riches were a wall and a mirror. She wanted a door. Anonymous work had become a habit. She had applied under an alias to fund small scholarships, book stipends, exam fees, 2 months' rent for a woman who needed to leave. Transfers that were tidy and quiet. Receipts that said AOL because she liked the way it sounded like a person who could be anyone. On a corkboard above the table were thank you notes written in pens that skipped. She read them sometimes when she needed to remember that money could be a verb. None of those notes mentioned ArcLight. That was the point. She poured water into a mug and sat with a laptop. The plaza lived in tabs. She found Kemi in a clip someone else had posted, her head wrap right, her voice sharp and right. She paused on the moment her hand reached for Maya's elbow and took a screenshot. Then Tari, the boy with a tray of phone cases, caught in the glare of someone's ring light offering water with a shy bravery that made his shoulders look larger than they were. She opened a new message and typed to Kemi first, using the number visible on a grocery club card dangling from her keychain in one clip, forwarded via a friend of a friend from the market. It was a risk. She decided it was worth it. This is Maya, the woman from the boutique. Thank you for what you did. Do you have your video from earlier? I'd like to keep a copy with the time it was recorded. I'm consulting with counsel. She kept it spare, free of the grand explanations that satisfy pride but confuse purpose. Then she typed a similar message to Tari, adding a question about whether he'd be comfortable giving a statement to a lawyer about what he saw. She hit send and, in the stretch of quiet that followed, listened to the fan. The phone buzzed almost immediately. Kemi's reply came first. I have it, and I have words, but the video is cleaner. Tell me where to send. She sent a link to a cloud folder. Tari's reply arrived shortly after, with 3 separate video files and an apology for shaking. She watched them all, the camera lens a little lower in his hands, as if he were trying to be small while doing something big. She dialed a number she knew by heart. Barrister Okoye, she said when he picked up. You sound like you've been sanded down, he said, which was exactly right. What happened? She told him with nouns and verbs. No adjectives. He listened the way people do, when they aren't waiting to talk. Send me everything, he said. We start with the facts. We demand their policies. We file with the Consumer Protection Council and the Human Rights Commission. In the meantime, do not post anything that becomes a stick to beat you with. He paused. Do you need me to remind you you don't owe anyone a reveal to be taken seriously? I know, she said. But I'm not interested in being taken seriously as a feeling. I'm interested in outcomes. Good, he said. She heard paper sliding, a pen uncapped. Also, ArcLight had that board reshuffle last quarter. They're touchy. It's leverage. I'll draft the letters tonight. She opened a fresh document and typed as he spoke, capturing the steps in clean lines. Demand letter with case law, regulatory complaints, request for CCTV footage from the store at 17:30 to 18:15, preservation notice to prevent deletion. When they hung up, she felt the floor under her feet again. The research came next. She knew ArcLight from the inside of family dinners and the outside of newspaper ink, but it was different to build a map for a fight. She dug through filings and press releases, through earnings calls translated into glossy language, through a leaked employee handbook she found on a watchdog forum that had grown quiet after a round of legal threats. A user named Farside had posted a PDF months ago titled Guest Risk and Deterrence, Field Guide. In dry corporate prose, it gave stores a way to profile without using the word. Indicators may include unkempt attire, loitering behaviors, oversized bags, checkboxes beside phrases like visible socioeconomic stressors. Suggested scripts for. She felt anger burn and bank itself into a heat she could use. She saved the file and printed it. Printer ink lines wavered slightly where the cartridges were old, but the words were plain. She highlighted the sentences that would read like a confession to anyone who'd ever been made into a spectacle for the comfort of others. Her map grew, a list of board members and their other ties, the PR firm that managed ArcLight's glossy charity campaigns, the dates of settlements quietly paid in cases that had never made it to trial. She pinned a calendar event onto the corner of the corkboard, ArcLight's annual charity gala 2 weeks away, a night of cameras and speeches about uplift from men who measured it in brand value. The old scar, being reduced to what you wore, what you carried, the way you looked when a long day slid over you like a shadow, itched in a place memory keeps. Once, years ago, an usher had refused her entry to a concert she was sponsoring because she'd come in jeans through the side door. The apology had come with handshakes and laughter, as if her being rich made the mistake harmless. It had taught her what money couldn't buy, the courtesy given freely to someone who looked the part. She closed the drawer with the clippings and opened a different file, a draft of a message she had been considering for weeks about dignity in public spaces, about policy disguised as politeness. She read it and deleted the lines that explained too much. Explanation was a cousin of excuse. She needed a story that wasn't about her at all, and yet could not be dismissed as an anecdote. She needed a mirror she could hold up that didn't show her face. Her phone chimed again. Kemi had uploaded the raw video and a written account with times and details a good witness remembers. The exact phrases, the order of events, the color of the tiles where the bag had been appended. Tari sent a nervous voice note asking if he had done the right thing, his breath quick between sentences. She replied to both with thanks and a promise to keep them informed. Across the city, the clips were still multiplying. She could feel their traction, like weather. She closed the social apps and opened a simple video editor. She placed the footage on a timeline, muted the parts that were noise, and left the parts that were proof. No music. No captions telling people how to feel. Faces blurred except the ones who had chosen the spotlight. It wasn't ready to post. It wasn't meant to go up tonight. Timing mattered more than adrenaline. She wrote 2 headings on a notepad and boxed them with her pen. Law. Story. Under law, she listed filings, the regulator addresses, the expectation that the boutique would try to spin. Under story, she wrote, calm, not spectacle, others' voices. Policy, not personalities. She underlined policy twice. She added a third word, softer, restitution. The fan hummed. Outside, a siren threaded through the evening, and then receded. She looked at the code again, the neat patch where the seam had been weak. The patch was visible if you knew where to look. She didn't mind that. Some things should be seen. She sent Okoye a folder link with the videos, screenshots, and her notes. She typed one more message to Kemi and Tari, letting them know a lawyer would reach out and that they could say no to anything that felt wrong. Then she set an alarm for morning when she would print the complaints and walk them to the courier herself, because handing them off would feel like a switch being flipped. She could have ended the day with a post that would set her name on fire. She didn't. She wanted more than heat. She wanted a clean burn that changed the air. When she finally lay down, the room had cooled. A moth tapped the window screen like someone asking not to come in, but to be noticed. She watched it for a moment and then closed her eyes, the map she had made hovering on the inside of her lids, 2 tracks laid in parallel, both leading to a place where apologies weren't performances and policies had teeth. By morning the city felt rinsed, the light clean, the air thin as paper. Maya walked to the courier with a manila envelope under her arm and the steadiness that comes from doing the exact next thing. Inside the envelope were printed complaints addressed to the Consumer Protection Council and the Human Rights Commission, each page signed, each exhibit labeled. A clerk weighed the bundle and stuck on tracking numbers with the bored efficiency of someone who moves consequences all day without touching them. She kept the receipts in her wallet behind a bus card, the way you'd keep a talisman. Not for luck, but to remember that rituals matter. Okoye called before she got back. "Draft's done," he said, the scrape of his chair legs and the flat thud of a stamp audible in the background. Demand letter cites unlawful public search and discriminatory profiling. Named parties, store manager Crane, security chief Ike, and the boutique entity as agent of Arclight. I'll courier the hard copy, email the soft, and file preservation notices for their CCTV and incident logs. I want them breathing around those documents all day. She pictured the letter moving through printers, through inboxes, through rooms where people arranged their faces into responsibility. "Send me a copy," she said. "It's in your mail already," he said. "Also, your witnesses are solid." Kemi writes like someone who has testified before, and the boy notices everything.
Tari, right?
Yes.
Good.
Now we watch their first move. It came before noon, a clarification, posted on the boutique's feed with glossy graphics and the temperature of artificial empathy. They regretted any misunderstanding that may have occurred, they said. Their commitment to guest safety was paramount. They did not say sorry. They did not say wrong. The final frame showed a photo of a smiling staff member handing a branded bag to a smiling customer. The caption implied that the real story was kindness. Maya read it twice and then once more, eyes dry, the way you read a contract for the trick clause. The trick was the word misunderstanding. She forwarded it to Okoye, who replied with a single line, "Good. That word will taste different under oath." The influencer followed with a video recorded in her car, ring light suction to the windshield, tone bright as a balloon. "Hey, my loves," she said. About yesterday, her face arranged itself into brave. "We all make mistakes. But we must protect businesses, too. If sis felt some type of way, I apologize if she took it wrong." The apology slid past responsibility, like oil slides past water. The comments were a split screen. Half heart emojis, half anger that looked like sentences. Maya closed the tab. Noise was a tactic. She would not hand it her time. She opened her editing program. On the timeline, she laid bystander clips like tiles and cut them to the bones. The command to empty the bag, the request for a private space and a female staff member, the refusal, the line of items on the ground, the nothing found, the remarks about presentation. She blurred her own face and left the others unmasked, anyone who had chosen the staging. Over the footage, she placed text that appeared for one breath only. Policy questioned. Request refused.
No sift.
She added a frame at the end with the address for the council and commission and a note. If this happened to you, here's how to file. No music.
No exclamation marks.
She posted it from an account with no name. It was a kind of experiment. What happens when evidence is offered without a performance telling you how to feel? For an hour, nothing happened. Then someone with a platform built on worker stories shared it, adding, "This is what profiling looks like in daylight." A public defender quote tweeted with 3 sentences about rights. A woman wrote, "This happened to my father outside an electronics store. He was 63. The graph of views began to draw itself upward in a line you could lean a ladder against. In the comments, people tagged Arclight and the regulators and each other. The word misunderstanding aged in real time until it looked like a lie. Maya opened a new message to a journalist she'd been reading since university. The man had a gift for making policy smell like the thing it was. "Mr. Adagok," she wrote, "I've followed your reporting on wage theft and security contracts. A pattern at Arclight. Public bag checks staged as deterrence. I have documents and witnesses." She attached the leaked guest risk and deterrence memo and offer times for a call. He replied in 15 minutes, "I've been chasing this for a year. Can you talk in 1 hour?" They spoke while the city performed lunch around her window. He asked questions that didn't flatter himself and didn't flatter her either. She answered them in the fewest words required. At the end he said, "Their gala is in 2 weeks. We timed the piece to run an hour before the red carpet." She could hear his smile through the line. "You going to be there?" "Yes," she said, and left it at that. The phone buzzed with a message from her fund manager. He was discreet the way a lock is discreet. You never think of it unless it fails. They had spoken last month about thresholds and timing, about the rights you earn at certain percentages, and the alarms you trigger. She had asked him to build a position in ArcLight quietly, across accounts that would let her step forward later with a single consolidated disclosure, if she wished. "We've crossed the line that lets you speak as a shareholder at meetings," he wrote now, "but we're below the one that makes filings unavoidable." As requested. He included 3 lines of numbers that translated into influence without spectacle. "Hold," she texted back. "Prepare a letter for the board's secretary requesting agenda time at the next meeting. Don't send yet." He sent a thumbs-up emoticon, the only childish thing he allowed himself. The influence wasn't just on paper. She met with a pastor whose congregants had complained about being searched in daylight like lessons, with a delivery rider whose backpack had been opened outside a home goods store while customers filmed, with a nurse who had been asked to show the contents of her purse on a lunch break while still wearing her badge. She listened and asked if they would tell their stories on record with a lawyer present. Some agreed. Some didn't. She told the ones who said no that no was a full sentence and meant it. Less clean were the messages that started arriving that evening, routed through platforms built for disappearing. A person using a first name only wrote to Kemi offering a goodwill voucher for your trouble and asked for her signature on a standard confidentiality agreement. The digits on the voucher were high enough to pay a month's rent. Kemi sent the screenshot to Maya with, "They think I can be hired to forget." Tari forwarded a similar offer, smaller, dressed up as a token of appreciation for helping us ensure security. He had typed, "Is this wrong to take?" before he deleted the question and sent the screenshot instead. Maya called Okoye, and he called them both. He explained NDAs and how silence seems small until it's stitched into a policy that covers everyone. Kemi laughed a laugh with no pleasure in it and said, "Let them keep their money." Tari sounded shaky but sure when he said, "I'll pass, sir." The influencer made a new video using freeze frames from Maya's posted clip. She adjusted the brightness to try and peek under the blur. She pointed to the outline of Maya's coat and announced, "This is a known scammer named." She gave a name that was not Maya's. Her followers doxed a woman in another city for 4 hours before someone posted a photo that made the lie obvious. The influencer deleted the video and replaced it with a dance. The harm remained. Maya forwarded the archive links to Adagok with a note. "This is what follows the stage check." He wrote back, concise, "It goes in." Inside the boutique, Crane did what men like him do under pressure. He tightened. A junior staffer sent a message to a friend, who sent it to Tari, who sent it to Maya. A screenshot from the employees' chat app with a memo instructing everyone to align our story and reiterate standard procedures, to avoid admissions and to direct all external inquiries to PR. The word align did a lot of work for 4 letters. Okoye added the memo to a folder labeled Character of Practice. The regulator's acknowledgement arrived on cream paper with a watermark you could feel with a fingertip. It was both more formal and more human than a post. "We have reviewed your complaint and the supporting materials," it read, "and find probable violations of the Consumer Protection Act and the Dignity in Public Accommodation regulations. A preliminary hearing is scheduled for the 18th at 10 o'clock. It listed a room number and the name of the officer assigned. Maya read it twice to make sure the date said what it said. She sent copies to Kemi and Tari with a simple, "Thank you for helping this move." Adagok called an hour later. "Green light from legal," he said. "Expose runs on the afternoon of the gala. We have ex-employees on record about the public reassurance policy. We have your video, the memo, the regulator's letter. We have 2 more witnesses willing to be named. PR begged for more time. We declined." He paused, then asked softly, "You're sure you want to walk into that room?" "Yes," she said, "but not as a spectacle." He didn't push. He had learned the difference. As the sun went down, the temperature of conversation around ArcLight changed. Investors didn't like words like violations. The PR firm published a second statement that used the word review 4 times in 3 paragraphs and promised listening sessions. Maya responded to none of it. She wrote a brief to herself instead. What she would say if given a mic, what she would refuse to say if asked for a story about pain. She drafted a shareholder letter that asked for an agenda item, suspension of public search practices company-wide, independent audit, restitution process. She left it unsent, hovering in her outbox like a chess piece held just above a square. Her phone buzzed with a message from her fund manager. Board secretary acknowledged receipt of our informal inquiry. They're open to hearing from engaged shareholders at the next meeting. No date yet. Another from Okoye. We have our hearing. We're something comfortable. We're bringing evidence, not theater. Another from Atagok. Gala dress code says, black tie with a heart. I want to throw up. Maya stood and took her coat from the chair. The new seam had set. She put it on and felt the weight of it find the slope of her shoulders, as if it remembered her. In the mirror by the door she saw an unremarkable woman in a mended coat looking back, and beneath that the person her parents' friends would recognize under chandeliers. Both existed. Both could be used. She took a pen from the dish by the keys and circled a date on the calendar. The night of the gala. The circle wasn't angry, just firm. It connected the regulator's hearing, the exposé, the shareholder letter, and something else she had been holding quiet. The moment when she would stop being a rumor by choice. She imagined the room, the flowers that smelled like money, the speeches written in rounded words, the cameras like small suns. She imagined stepping into that light under her own terms. She clicked off the fan and opened the window wider. The air came in with all its cues, the evening sellers, the clatter of plates, a lone saxophone warming up in a flat above the grocery. She breathed it the way divers breathe before they go under, not to hold forever, just long enough to reach the next shore. The night smelled like new money and old cologne. Cars slid along the drop-off like fish in a lit tank, doors opening to spill sequins and tuxedos onto a carpet the color of a promise. Flashbulbs popped in a chain, a sugar crackle on the air. Beyond the flowers tall as children, a string quartet pulled sweetness from wood, the notes polished until they reflected faces back at themselves. Maya arrived in a dress that had weight and memory, black silk that took light like water. Over it she wore the same mended coat from the plaza. The seam she'd stitched herself caught nothing, no eye, no snag, unless you knew to look. She stepped out of a car that had been hired, not chauffeured, and the small hush that follows recognition moved through the nearest cluster of donors. Names were whispered in tones that hoped to be casual. The crest at her necklace was small and exactly the right size for people who read footnotes. Across the street, in a newsroom lit as if morning had been imported by force, Atagok's exposé published. The notifications reached the phones in the press pen first. You could see it happen, screens brightening, mouths tightening into interest, a producer tapping a colleague's elbow, 3 camera operators straightening as if a cue had been called. In minutes the word misunderstanding, which had spent 2 days trying to pass as fact, buckled. A tag that had tried to make the plaza look like a cork turned into a map of incidents, dates, stores. People began posting their own clips. The quartet played on, unaware or pretending. A handler in a headset stepped toward Maya with a smile built to hurt. Ms. Arclight, if we could just... No need, she said and walked to the microphones. The microphones waited like small black mouths. The cameras woke. Good evening, she said. No drama. 3 days ago, I was subjected to a public search outside one of this company's boutiques. I asked to be taken inside, to have a female staff member present. I was refused. Nothing was found. A manager advised me to watch how I look. The phrase landed in the cluster of cameras like a coin. I am not here for sympathy. I am here because this was not an accident. It is a practice codified, coached, defended, of turning people into a warning sign. It is unlawful. It is indecent. The PR woman whose job it was to hover took a step and then thought better of it. I am asking for 4 things, Maya continued, counting them quietly on a gloved hand. 1. An immediate, public end to all street-side bag checks and searches. Any security check must be private, consensual, and by a same-gender staffer, with clear written policy available on request. 2. A transparent, independent audit of all stores' practices to be published in full. 3. Paid retraining for staff that centers dignity and de-escalation. 4. A victims fund for those already harmed by this practice, administered by an independent body. Not vouchers. Restitution. Are you suing? Someone called. My counsel has filed complaints with regulators, she said. We welcome their process. I am also a shareholder. In the lounge inside, I'll be calling for an extraordinary board meeting tonight to suspend implicated executives pending investigation and to adopt this reform package. Why wear that coat? Another asked, half sneer, half sincerity. Because the line between who gets humiliated and who gets escorted around it is sometimes stitched as thin as this, she said, touching the seam. I won't pretend I don't know which side I was born on. The questions pressed forward, trying to find spectacle. She didn't feed them. You'll hear other voices tonight, she said. Not just mine. She stepped back. The quartet finished a movement with professional grace. The applause landed with a hollow sound, like hands clapping in a stairwell. Inside, the ballroom had the gleam of a place that exists to convince you there is no weather. A hedge of donors traded words like favors. In the shareholder lounge, a quieter room with carpet that softened footsteps into secrets, names were checked, badges clipped. Portraits of past chairs watched from gilt frames. The board occupied a corner, as if they were not cornered. They arranged their features into welcome when Maya approached, then shifted into the neutrality that powerful people use when they would rather you not exist. The secretary, a man whose tie knot was a geometry problem, held a clipboard like a shield. As a shareholder, Maya said, I'm requesting an extraordinary meeting under Section 42 of the bylaws. She laid a letter on the table, her manager's draft, signed by her hand. Agenda: immediate suspension of any executive responsible for the public reassurance policy, adoption of a company-wide halt to public searches, commissioning of an independent audit, creation of a victims fund with external oversight, retraining with metrics and consequences. She looked at each director in turn until they had to look back. We can do this now. Or we can do it under brighter lights outside that door. We take these matters seriously, the chair said, hitting each word like a nail. But extraordinary meetings are for extraordinary circumstances. They are, Maya said. Turn on your phones. They did almost in unison, the choreography of people who were always waiting for the next thing. The exposé glowed up at them. Under the careful sentences were careless ones. Quotes from memos that didn't think they'd ever be read, testimony that sounded like the plaza in different clothes. A donor passing the doorway glanced in, caught the mood, and texted someone else with a speed that lives in the fingers more than the mind. The chair's face moved through 3 expressions and landed on calculation. 15 minutes, he said to the secretary, who didn't quite hide his relief at being told what to do. Invite them, Maya said. Invite whom? The people whose lives are the reason we're here. In the small anteroom adjacent to the lounge, Kemi stood with her shoulders back, head wrapped bright as a flag you'd follow. Tari adjusted a borrowed blazer, fingers worrying at a frayed cuff until Kemi stilled his hand with hers. A handful of others waited too. The delivery rider, the nurse, a retail worker from a sister store with a pink line on her wrist where a bracelet had once been snatched off by a guard checking for alarms. Atago covered, notebook closed. Tonight, witness before writer. Maya thanked them with her eyes and led them in. The board's attempt at blandness failed on contact. The room felt suddenly crowded by truth. The meeting began. The secretary read out the motion, voice trying to be ceremonial and coming out tired. The chair opened the floor. Kemi spoke first, not because she wanted to, but because she knew how. You've built a machine, she said, that makes humiliation look like service. It is not a misunderstanding. It is policy made into theater. I'm not here to perform my pain. I am here to say change it. Tari's voice shook at the start and steadied by its own courage. I cell phone cases, he said. I watch people film other people like they're less than people. That day I thought if I say nothing, I'm helping. He told them what he saw. He did not embellish. The nurse added her lunch break story, the writer his backpack search, each detail stacked like bricks until the wall was undeniable. A director cleared his throat, a sound meant to reassert a hierarchy. We regret. No, Maya said, and the word was gentle but final. Regret isn't policy. Votes are. Through the glass, you could see the gala still spinning. A speech starting on the main stage, the host beaming phrases about community, waiters moving like a quiet tide. In the corner, a television muted by habit nonetheless showed the crawl of the news. Arclight practices under fire. The chair called for discussion. One director worried aloud about exposure. Another suggested more training without admitting why. The general counsel warned about precedent, and then, seeing the tide, repositioned. Interim measures would demonstrate good faith. The investor representative looked at his phone and said softly, "The market is watching." Maya didn't argue. She had already said what mattered. She let the witness's words do the work. She thought of the coat seam, visible if you looked. The chair called the vote on emergency measures. Hands rose, not all at once, not without reluctance, but enough. The secretary counted, voice smaller than his tie.
Passed.
The chair turned to HR. "Effective immediately, suspend public search practices pending audit," he said, as if he'd always meant to. Pierre will announce the reversal within the hour. Establish a fund with initial capitalization of, he named a figure that would play well on camera and hurt enough to be noticed. Retain an external firm for oversight. Draft terms for staff retraining. And he swallowed something like pride. Place the relevant retail operations VP on leave pending investigation. It didn't go as high as it should have yet, but it went higher than nothing. A junior aide slipped in and murmured in the chair's ear. He nodded, standing on the moment like a dock. "Where is Mr. Crane tonight?" "In the ballroom," someone said. "Send for him." Crane arrived 2 minutes later, confusion followed by the education of his face as he read the room. The chair informed him of his removal from duty pending investigation. Crane tried to assemble a sentence. The middle fell out. He left with his jaw set and his shoulders learning, too late, what humility felt like from the inside. The PR team drafted the statement in the corner as if they were writing an elegy for a version of themselves. It went out to every account ArcLight owned. The hashtags that had turned into indictments softened, not into forgiveness, but into attention. A cheer began somewhere in the ballroom. Ripple misapplied to the wrong speech, and then corrected itself as the news reached ears and screens. The quartet shifted to a different key. In the press corridor, the influencer waited like a moth attracted to the strongest light. When Maya emerged, she stepped forward, phone high, smile glossy. "We're all about accountability here," she chirped. "I'd love to amplify your journey. Maybe a quick live." "No," Maya said, not unkind, simply not available for conversion into content. "If you want help, post the filing instructions. Donate to the fund. Apologize to the woman you misnamed." The influencer's mouth made a shape that could only exist on camera. She posted a selfie anyway, captioned with words that tried to smell like contrition. On stage, the host stumbled through a joke and tossed to a corporate VP who had been meant to talk about literacy. He talked about listening instead. It wasn't a bad pivot for a man who had just seen the ground turn under him. In the lounge, the witnesses looked at one another with the small, stunned smiles of people who had been told for a long time that nothing could ever move and had just felt the floor shift. A director who wore his suit like armor waited by the doorway as Maya passed. He had the look of a man who believed in weights and measures. "You've made enemies," he said quietly, as if offering her a choice between dessert and a warning. "I made a promise," she said and walked on. Outside, the air had cooled. The carpet glowed with its own borrowed starfield. The city beyond the barricades kept doing what cities do, cars and laughter and shoes that hurt and pockets that were empty and pockets that were full and the complicated business of people. Maya stepped into it with the coat, holding her warmth and the seam holding its line. The night felt different, not because it was fixed, but because someone had said out loud how it would be, and then made the room agree. In the days after the gala, action stopped being a speech and turned into work that left fingerprints. The first sign was literal. A laminated placard appeared on the boutique door where the hours used to stand alone. The old "no food, no pets" was joined by language so plain it was almost beautiful. Security checks, if required, will be conducted privately, with consent, by a same-gender staff member. Guests may request a written copy of policy. Staff must provide it. A man with a level held the notice steady, while another drove in the screws. People paused to read. A woman laughed once, not mockery, but relief, like a knot loosening. Inside, training began in the back rooms where employees usually ate standing up. A facilitator with a raspy voice and a stack of dog-eared handouts kept saying, "Dignity is not an extra." They role-played. Some rolled their eyes and then didn't. Scripts that had once taught theater now asked for conversation. You could see the awkwardness like a fever breaking. A girl barely 20 raised her hand and said, "What if the manager says do it out there?" The facilitator tapped the new policy binder. "You say, the policy says we take it inside. And if you get punished, this number is where you call." He wrote the hotline on the whiteboard, then handed out cards stamped with it, 10 digits like a new language. The hotline went live on a Tuesday at 9. By noon, the call center had a rhythm. Log, listen, triage, connect. The first voice belonged to a man who had not planned to cry, who kept apologizing for crying anyway. The second call brought silence for a full minute before words took its place. The third was from a staffer who wanted to confirm that she would not be fired for refusing to drag someone outside. "You won't," the operator said, and heard the sigh come through the wires. The phones rang steady and then steadier. Someone taped up a printed sign over the coffee machine. "You are allowed to be moved by this and still be good at your job." Compensation began as numbers on spreadsheets and became bank alerts and rent paid and groceries that didn't have to be counted item by item. Recipients came in pairs sometimes, mother and son, two friends who'd watched each other be made small, a couple who'd been stopped like a cautionary tale on their anniversary. A woman with gray hair and a cracked phone screen signed a form and then sat in a waiting chair a long time, staring at her hands, as if she needed to catch up to the fact that someone had named what was done to her and then put money behind it. The legal piece landed with a sound that wasn't loud but carried far. Okoye called at 8:03 and didn't pretend not to be pleased. "We have a settlement," he said. "Not the slippery kind. Admissions on the public search practice. The words are in there. They say they were wrong." He read the relevant lines to her. Acknowledgement that public, non-consensual searches had violated law and policy, agreement to permanent injunction, establishment of a monitoring period with an independent auditor. "Funds are earmarked to the Civil Dignity Coalition," he added. 5 years indexed. She pictured the coalition's cramped office lit like a winter morning, the staff there blinking at numbers that would make the walls feel larger. There were signatures and stamps, and the strange, formal poetry of seals. The board chair stood beside a podium and used the word accountability, without swallowing it. A reporter asked if this was about optics. The chair said, "It's about harm." It didn't fix his history, but it was better than the sentences he would have chosen last week. Maya let herself be ordinary those days. Tea that went cold on the second sip, emails that were verbs, walking to the corner to buy oranges heavy enough to change her hand. The mended coat hung on the chair like patience. She wrote 3 letters no one would ever see. One to the woman in the old clipping who had stood outside a factory gate with a sign. One to herself at 19 who thought the world could be politely rearranged. One to the city, which she loved even when it refused to love back. She did not send them anywhere. She folded them small and put them in the pocket with the safety pin. She did not post a victory speech. She answered questions when answering would make something move. She said no to the brightly lit offers that smelled like branding. The influencer messaged her, every sentence wearing a soft sweater. "We should go live together.
Show growth.
Show we can build." Maya typed and erased, and then typed what she meant. No live. If you want to do something useful, platform the hotline and the coalition's intake form. Don't center yourself. And apologize directly to the woman you misnamed. The read receipt sat for 2 hours before a single heart appeared, lonely and unconvincing. 2 days later, the influencer posted a list of resources without commentary. It was the best version of the apology she was capable of. It would have to do. Kemi met her in a cafe with windows that made the street look like a movie. Kemi wore joy like a new scarf, but she didn't make it loud. "They came to the market," she said. 2 managers and a lawyer. They said the words, not the fake ones. They said sorry and it landed. She stirred her tea and watched the spoon. "It didn't erase anything," she added, "but it put weight on the right side of the scale." Then, after a beat, "You kept your head when the lights were bright. That matters." Maya thanked her and meant it. Kemi waved a hand. If people like us don't hold lines, the lines disappear. On a mild morning, the plaza looked like a place that had learned something without losing itself. The same busker tuned his guitar with a seriousness that made the instrument feel honored. The same vendor roasted corn, the scent braided with diesel and fried dough. New were the signs, the policy placard on the boutique's glass, another inside by the counter. A staffer propped the door and invited a customer in with a practice sentence, not obsequious, not hard. "If you have a security concern," he said, "we'll handle it privately." He pointed at the sign like a promise. Maya bought coffee from Tari, who had upgraded from a tray to a small cart with a borrowed umbrella. He wore a grin a little too big for his face, like happiness he hadn't quite had time to grow into. He handed her a paper cup with a lid that clicked. "Auntie, guess what?" he said, breathless, and then didn't make her guess. He unzipped the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a letter, carefully refolded to protect its edges. A foundation's name at the top, neutral font, decent paper. A scholarship, not enough to make him relaxed forever, enough to make a semester possible without selling sleep. He showed her the amount and the conditions and the line about community work he'd already done, without knowing it counted. "They said it's anonymous," he said. "But whoever it is, God will bless them." She smiled over the lid, steam wetting her lip. "Whoever it is did the easy part," she said. "You already did the hard part." He put the letter away, with the care you give to documents that promise a different future, the kind of care that turns paper into a talisman. Across the way, a crew stood in orange vests with a drill and another sign. A small cluster formed the way clusters always do. Phones rose. This time the camera lenses didn't seek a person to shame. They filmed words being installed. The hotline, the policy, the fact that a search would happen inside, if it happened at all. A man in a suit asked if the policy was real or a PR thing. The installer said, "It's a rule. We're trained." The man nodded like that made the coffee taste better. Crane did not come out of the boutique. He had been moved somewhere where his posture couldn't harm anyone for a while, pending the long work of investigations. Men like him had other corridors. He would find one. But the sign didn't care where he went. The sign stood. A delivery rider paused, read it, and smiled like something unclenched in his chest. A grandmother with a floral bag read it and said, "Good." Okoye called to say the auditor had been chosen, not a friend of the company, someone with a spine. The coalition posted a photo of boxes labeled with case files, a caption that said simply, "We're hiring." Donations clicked up like rain on a tin roof. Maya transferred a second tranche through the foundation she used for the quiet things. She kept a ledger in her head of the promises she'd made to herself and put a tick by 2 of them. Others remained, not as weights, but as directions. Kemi walked with her as far as the fruit stall. "You know they'll move the policy underground somewhere else," Kemi said. It wasn't cynicism. It was memory. Different name, same harm. "I know," Maya said. "We'll keep watching. We'll keep making the mirror." She touched the seam of her coat. It had held through the gala, through the meetings, through the mornings when she felt the tiredness like sand. It would hold longer. A seam wasn't a scar if you chose to see it as structure. At noon, a staffer stepped to the boutique doorway and, instead of blocking it, made a little bow with his arm. "Please, inside," he told a woman whose bag had set off the alarm. His tone said, "We respect you enough to do this right." The woman looked surprised, then grateful, then like she would tell someone later on the phone. 2 teenagers filmed it and laughed, not cruelly, just because it felt like seeing a glitch fix itself in real time. Maya walked past the circle, past the busker beginning a song that had been overplayed into threadbare and still managed to feel new when the sun hit it. People held their phones up, but the light hitting the policy sign threw a small glare that made them lower them to angle better. The crowd wasn't hungry tonight. It was witnessing. That was different. She adjusted the strap of her backpack out of habit and felt the familiar dig, the one she now allowed to be part of her. The coat, once threadbare, was neatly mended, the stitchwork straight as a thought well held. She didn't hurry. She didn't shrink. Shoulders level. She moved through the plaza that had seen her made into a warning and now saw her as something steadier. The city breathed around her, ordinary and therefore holy. Cellars, buses, laughter that spilled and had to be caught, a sign being screwed into glass. Power isn't the secret you keep, she thought. It's the promise you keep. She let the words sit inside her like a settled coin. Then she walked on, and the day kept going, and under it all the small machines of change kept working. The phones, the drills, the printers grinding out policy, the hands that refused to let dignity be an optional add-on. Hey besties, thanks so much for sticking around till the end. If you felt something, learned something, or just enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button. See you next time, bye.